Hi guys, this is Mr. Tan, and today we're going to be looking at supply chain management, virtual organizations, IS and SCM. We're going to look at this in relation to digital marketing, e-business, and e-business and e-marketing. So session learning outcomes includes to identify the main elements of supply chain management and their relationship to the value chain and value networks. Assess the potential of information systems to support supply chain management and the value chain. If we think about the value chain can be considered, if we remember, the core primary structures and the secondary structures. The primary structures includes things like the inbound logistics, operations, outbound, marketing, and services. As the primary functions, and then the secondary functions and supporting functions being, HR, technological, the firm's infrastructures, and various others. So again, when we look at this is all involved and interconnected with the value chain in terms of inbound logistics and outbound logistics, and how we get the supplies that are necessary for the component parts, the products, the end products, and a different variety of different products that we have from which suppliers. Okay, so we're going to be looking at this in relation to e-business and e-marketing. So supply chain management. Supply chain management is essential. Essentially the optimization of material flows and associated information flows involved with an organization's operations. To manage these flows, digital business applications are essential today. So, we're talking about the flow of materials and associated information flows, in terms of the inbound logistics, in terms of the primary functions to the operations. So, if we were to take Tesco's, for instance, we could say that where do Tesco's get their inbound, goods and products from, and then the operations are putting this all together, how it flows, whether it's inside Tesco's or whether it's using cross-docking another supplier to hold the goods. In relation to an e-business or e-marketing, if we think about Amazon, well, what do Amazon do in terms of all their goods and services, and where do these flows come from? So when we think about the organization's products and so on and so forth, how does this get delivered and how does this get to the end consumer? So consumers may buy these products which are advertised online. So how then do these goods get through within the operations and then to the outbound logistics to the end consumer? So supply chain management is presented as the premier application of digital business, since it is a unifying concept that incorporates both e-procurement and sales side of e-commerce. So how do we get these goods, and are we going to buy these goods and store them, or are we going to let the manufacturers store the goods and then send out the orders to the manufacturers who have these products, and then let them send it out direct? And then the sales side of the e-commerce obviously is selling direct to the end consumer. So the consumer buys the products, and then how does the company distribute that product out to the end consumer? So problems with supply chain management: inventory turnover. An indication of efficiency of inventory turnover, calculated by the cost of goods sold divided by the average inventory. So the inventory turnover, how quickly can we turn over the goods if we are buying these goods in and then stocking them? Because if we are stocking these goods, then these goods have incurred a cost on the business, and then you have warehousing costs, staffing costs, picking costs, packing costs, distribution costs. So the quicker you can get these goods in and then out to the end consumer, the quicker you can get your money back and your profit from the end consumer. So increasing supply chain efficiency involves reducing the holding, within inventory and maximizing sales. So this is what we're talking about. We're talking about, not holding more than is necessary, depending upon the demand, whilst at the same time maximizing the sales. And other problems include, in individual companies, inventory turnover is used as a measure of the number of times inventory is sold or used in a period of time, such as a year. So again, the inventory turnover, how quick is your inventory turnover? How many days does it take you to turn over that inventory? So problems with the supply chain management, pressure to reduce costs of manufacturing and distributing products in order to remain competitive, because this is a big cost. It's a big cost to buy in these product items, to store them, to pack them, and then to pick them when the orders are there, and then to pack them, and then to just distribute them out. Is a big cost involved. So trying to minimize that cost in terms of minimizing your overall costs of the expenses of the company, maximizing the net profit in relation to your competitors, so that you can reinvest this money if necessary back into the business to make you more efficient and more competitive. So so how does digital technology, how can it reduce problems in SCM? A reduction in paperwork through electronic transmission if orders involves and delivery notes. Reduced inventory holdings needed through better understanding of demand. Reduced time for information and component supply, across the supply chain. Lower SCM system purchase and management costs through use of online services. So now we're saying, rather than using paper, we're using electronic transmission, so it's faster, for invoices and for delivery notes, and it can be stored in a more efficient way as well. So it's quicker, it's there, and therefore, reduced inventory holdings, needed through better understanding of demand. So again, if we can, understand the demand at different times in the year and different times, or if it's seasonal products, then we can buy in accordingly depending upon the lead times. Demand forecasting, so problems with supply chain demand, failure to deliver products on time consistently, or the lack of items on the shelf in the retailer, failure to deliver or ship correct products, or high inventory costs. So time for new product development. So these are all problems with supply chain management: inventory costs, failure to deliver and ship on time, and getting a bad image, getting a bad reputation, not being able to do this. Because then if someone else comes along and does it better than you, then people are going to talk and say where they can get it, and where it's consistent or lower cost, and so on and so forth. And so eventually you will be, out of business, because your competitor will be doing it better than you. And how can digital technology can reduce these problems? Demand forecasting, sharing of demand by customers and suppliers, part of efficient customer response. In terms of failure to deliver products, so supplier becomes more responsible for items in terms of their availability, through vendor managed inventory. In terms of the failure to deliver or ship correct products, again, human error reduced. Checks and balances can be built into the system. So again, when we look at the problems of supply chain management, we can see on the other side of the coin how digital technology can reduce these problems, in SCM. So SCM, supply chain management. So supply chain management, it is the coordination of the supply activities of an organization, from its suppliers and partners to its customers. I mean, it's supply chain management is absolutely crucial, and later on we'll be talking about different ways to get and different ways to get your supply chain management. You may want to buy some goods direct, and you may want to hold some goods, but then you may want to have other goods that you want to buy as and when is needed, depending upon the supply times from your suppliers, and then have those as special items. Again, that will also depend on demand forecasting, and will also depend upon what is needed and what quantity is needed when. So let's look at this. So the main members of the supply chain product or service. So here we can see, going upstream from the supplier. So and then you have the organization in terms of the e-commerce side. So you have the supplier, the company selling e-commerce to the customer, to the sell e-side to the customer. Downstream supply chain. And if we think about the bottom one, where we have B, where we have the supplier, and then the supplier will maybe sell to intermediaries like a wholesaler, and then the organization might actually buy from the wholesaler and not from the supplier direct, in which case there's a middleman and there's another cost involved. And then downstream, again, if the organization, before they sell direct to the customer, they sell to an intermediary, and then the customer buys from the intermediary. Okay, so again we're looking at the blue being the inbound logistics and the green being the outbound logistics. So what method is it? Ideally it's better probably from the top one, from A, where the organization is buying direct from the supplier, rather than an intermediary, because then they're getting it at a cheaper cost and going direct to the customer. So that's the best case scenario if available. So for most commercial and not-for-profit organizations, we can distinguish between upstream supply chain and downstream supply chain. So when we're talking about the upstream, we're talking about transactions between an organization and its suppliers and intermediaries, equivalent to buy side of e-commerce. And when we're talking about downstream transactions, we're talking about transactions between an organization and its customers and intermediaries, equivalent to sell side of e-commerce. So upstream is going from the supplier to the organization, and downstream is going from the organization to the customer. So supply chain network. The supply chain network, the links between the organization and all partners involved in multiple supply chains, because you don't just have one supply chain, you may have multiple supply chains, and you may be buying direct from a supplier or direct from an intermediary, and you also might go direct from the manufacturer, and they then hold stock itself. So there are different ways to view this. Efficient consumer response, ECR. This is creating and satisfying customer demand by optimizing the product assortment strategies, promotions, and new product introductions. So here we're talking about the product range, optimizing the product assortment strategies. What product range do you have, what's available, promotions, and new product introductions as well. Using technology to support the supply chain, implemented early implementation in 1989 to 1993, with electronic mail, electronic trading gateway to 1990-1994, and the movement towards internet commerce from 1996 going onwards, late 1996 going onwards. So a simple model of a supply chain, a simple model, is an organization's supply chain can be viewed from a systems perspective as the acquisition of resources, which are the inputs or the products or component parts, and their transformation, the process. So putting these together, packaging component parts into a new product, into products and services, outputs. Okay, so inputs, process, outputs. So we can see here, if we think about the blue, and we are reviewing upstream supply chain management, and then going, and if you remember, we said that upstream was going from the supplier to the organization. So we're saying suppliers, then you might have the supplier's warehouse, then you might have an independent wholesaler who buys from the supplier's warehouse, and then you might have a business to business retailer who might buy from the independent wholesaler, and then to the distributor, and then the manufacturer, the business to business company. So upstream. Okay, and again, you might have suppliers agents selling direct from the suppliers straight to the manufacturer's company. If you think about the downstream, where you have the company, the manufacturer, again, you might have business to business, warehouse, company warehouse, independent wholesaler, business to business retailer or exchange, distributor, and then to the customer. Or you might go from, business to business company, from an agent to the customer. So that's going upstream. So you got, that's going downstream. So you got upstream going from the supplier to the company, and then the downstream going from the company to the end consumer. Okay, so isn't a question task here to examine the nature of business to business supply chain and its potential for modification through restructuring and information systems as part of digital business development. Questions. Discuss the opportunities for business to business company to restructure its supply chain as part of the move to digital business and the benefits this may bring. How can information systems be used to accomplish the changes you have identified in question 1? Well, what springs to mind. One example is again from Tesco's, and Tesco's might, for example, buy and sell 50-inch TV screens, but then they don't hold these 50-inch TV screens in their warehouses. So they stock them, but they don't actually buy the products until they're needed. So once a customer goes in store and buys a product or buys it online, then that order is taken from Tesco's, emailed out to the customer, and then the customer will send that product direct to the end consumer, cross-docking. Even if we think about Amazon, will not hold all these products. In the main, other companies will hold these products. They will take the order from these companies, and then these products will be shipped out by individual people who are selling these products on Amazon. But there will be some products that Amazon might hold if they own these products themselves. So again, depending upon the acquisitions and the product range that they have. So again, this is how the digital business is moving, meaning that they can hold less stock, and they can transfer that side of shipping those goods out to the consumer by someone else. So what is logistics? Inbound logistics, and this is the management of material resources entering an organization from its suppliers and other partners. So if you can think about all the materials and resources that are entering into an organization, from its suppliers, and these might be completed products, completed in their packaging, or these might be component parts where you have these products put together yourself in in a warehouse. So again, it might mean different things depending upon the products that you're selling and the product range that you're selling. So according to the Institute of Logistics and Transportation, logistics is the time-related positioning of resource, or the strategic management of the total supply chain. The supply chain is a sequence of events intended to satisfy a customer. It can include procurement, manufacture, distribution, and waste disposal, together with associated transport, storage, and information technology. So logistics and of the whole supply chain. I can remember when I had set up my business, e-business, and it was called www.stylehomeinteriors.com. It was selling soft furnishings, and we had a range of suppliers. We had a range of suppliers which we bought from all the main kind of like distributors and wholesalers and manufacturers in the UK. So these manufacturers would have these goods imported, and then they will hold these stock and they will sell these goods to either wholesalers or to retailers. So we would buy from these from these manufacturers in the UK. So we wouldn't hold any of the stock, but we would put all their products on our website and we would market their products, and then when we got a sale for those products, then we would place the order to the manufacturer and then pay for those goods, or if you had an invoice, you could pay 30 days later. So we didn't have to hold that stock, but we would do the marketing for towards the end consumer to sell it. But then we had another range of products, specialty products, whereby other suppliers couldn't actually come up with these products, but there was a need for these products. So these products included longer curtain poles, 2.5 meters in one piece, 28mm diameter, 50mm diameter. So we brought these in from China. So we bought in a container load of these in from China, and we stored it in the UK. We went to Italy and we bought, wooden bends for a bay window with wooden C-rings and wooden brackets that allowed the C-rings to pass over the brackets. And again, this was a specialty product, so we had to buy in the 28mm, the 30 to 35mm curtain poles in 3 different colors, with the X number of bends, X number of straight poles, 1.2, 1.5 meter lengths, and we would store these products to make up a complete. So these products would come in component parts. So you would get poles in 1.2 meters lengths, 1.5 meter lengths. You would get the finials, which were separate. You would get the brackets, which were separate. You would get the rings, which were separate. You would get the corner bends, which were separate. So all these component parts were all separate, and they would, a complete pack would make up one product, depending upon how many bends and how many rings and how many brackets a customer needed. So your supply chain and your logistics is really dependent upon your product range and where you're buying your supplies from, and it might be a number of suppliers at different stages within the supply chain. So again, the logistics and the e-commerce side of it is essential to monitoring and understanding in terms of stock control as well, where everything is and how much you have to allow for the demand of these products, and if you need to buy in, the time it takes to get these shipped over, and then brought all the way over, put into a container, and then go through the appropriate checks, and then it might get held up at the ports as well for additional checks. So again, all these time needs to be taken into consideration regarding the amount of demand at a particular time, so you plan for that. So having your e-business and your procurement and your logistics to all your different suppliers is extremely important. Push and pull supply chain models. A supply chain that emphasizes distribution of a product to passive customers. Supply chain thinking, and also in marketing communication thinking, is the move from push models of selling to pull models, or a combined push-pull approach. So we're going to look at push-pull approaches. So what do we mean by push and pull? Well, push supply chain, this is where a supply chain that emphasizes distribution of a product to passive customers. So you're pushing it through to passive customers. And pull supply chain, well, this is emphasizing the use of supply chain to deliver value to customers who are actively involved in the product and service specification. So here, these customers actually want this, so they're pulling the product out. So here we can see here another example of push to customer and pull from the customer. So here we have the supplier with the typical aim: optimize the production process for cost and efficiency. And typical characteristics includes, manufacturer-led new product development, poor data integration from limited use of technology, long cycle response times, and high inventory levels, independent data management by supply chain members, limited use of EDI. So again, we have the supplier, and then the supplier, distributes to the manufacturer the component parts, and the manufacturer will put it together and then sell to the distributor, and the retailer could buy from the distributor or the manufacturer depending upon how large the retailer is, or the retailer could go straight to the supplier if it's a really multiple chain, and then the retailer would then sell to the customer. In terms of pull, again, the typical aim here is, enhance the product and service quality. Typical characteristics includes, market research driven, technology uses to achieve research and data integration, you know, short cycle and response times, low inventory levels, and the use of, IS, integrated, internal systems, information sharing between supply chain members, extensive use of EDI and e-commerce, often through business-to-business exchanges and intermediaries. So here we have, again, going the other way in terms of, pull by the customer to the retailer, to the distributor, to the manufacturer, and to the supplier. So the value chain represented by VC, this is a model that considers how supply chain activities can add value to products and services delivered to the customer. So remember, when we're talking about the value chain, it's, how can we, add value to the products within your whole system, within your organization, in terms of the primary activities and the secondary activities. So again, if you remember at the beginning, I said that the primary activities included the inbound, processing, outbound, marketing, and service department, and then the secondary activities included things like HR, technology, infrastructure, information systems, and so on and so forth. So Michael Porter's value chain, again, if we look at Michael Porter's value chain, is a well-established concept of considering key activities that an organization can perform or manage with the intention of adding value to the customer as products and services move from conception to delivery to the customer. So here we've got A in terms of the inbound logistics, production, outbound, and then you have sales and marketing. So you've got the primary activities, and then, as I said before, you've got the secondary activities being human resources, finance, and information systems, and the organizational structure as well. And then B below, you've got market research. You've got new product development. You've got to market the products, procure the materials, procure the products, and manage selling and fulfillment. Okay. So you've got two alternative members of the value chain, traditional value chain approach and the revised value chain model. So which one, do? But I think you need them all. Do you understand? You need both, because you do need A and you do need B. You've got to have, you've got to have the right systems in place and the organizational systems in place, because, how are you going to add value if it's costing the company too much and it's your operations are too slow to cope with delivering it out to the end consumer, where you might have a cross-docking system with e-marketing where you don't hold the product, so you email it out, the sales order to the supplier, and they send it out direct for you. And you must again have the human resources, the right people. You must have the right finance and the information systems to carry out your activities. But likewise, you still need, part of the marketing process, the marketing strategy in terms of STP, in terms of segmentation, targeting, and positioning, in terms of your market research. You need new product development. You need the finances in your secondary value chain activities for new product development. The lifeblood of any company are new products. You need to be able to market the products. Here you got in the primary activity, sales and marketing. So again, these products in B are similar to the sales and marketing in A. Procure materials, and procure products. Well, that is all part of the secondary value chain activities in A. So as well as the human resources, finance, and information systems, you've also got the procurement of supplies, which is not there, but it should be there. So you've got that, which represents that part as well, and then you've got the managed selling and fulfillment. So again, all these elements are actually part and parcel together. Okay, so these are part and parcel together. So the value stream, Womack and Jones, 1998, define the value stream as the set of all the specific actions required to bring a specific product through the three critical management tasks of any business, And these three critical management tasks, including problem solving, the process of new product development and production launch, the information management task, the process of order taking, scheduling and delivery, and the physical transformation task, which is the process of transforming raw materials to the finished product delivered to the end consumer. So these are the three, but these, are standard in terms of what you need to do. But, can you do it in the most efficient and effective way to maximize gross profits and to minimize costs? That is the question, because then that makes you more competitive, whereby you can make more net profit, more retained earnings, and therefore reinvest back into the business and be in business longer, because you'll have more money to reinvest back into new product development, research, advertising, marketing, and so on and so forth. So the value stream, this is the combination of actions required to deliver value to the customer, as products and services. So how can an organization positively impact its value chain by investing in new or upgraded information systems? Porter and Millar, 1985, proposed the following 5-step process. So what we're saying is, we're talking about information systems here to positively impact on its value chain. And the thing is, if you are Amazon, if you are Tesco's, if you are a big organization, you need the right integrated information monitoring systems to know what you've got where and how long you've had it for. And if you don't, then how are you going to know what is where and why and for how long and how much does it cost? You're not going to know. So Porter and Millar suggest that there are 5 steps, and these includes step 1, to assess the information intensely of the value chain. So they're talking about the level and usage of information within each value chain activity and between each level of activity. Okay, the higher the level of intensity and or the higher degree of reliance on good quality information, the greater the potential impact of new information systems. So again, how much information is required, how intense is it, how much is one element dependent upon another in terms of information. Step 2, determine the role of IS in the industry structure. It is also important here to understand that information linkages between the buyers and sellers, and suppliers, the buyers and suppliers within the industry, and how they and competitors might be affected by and react to new information technology. Okay, so new information technology is very, very important to understand the linkages between the buyers and suppliers. Step 3, identify the rank. Identify and rank the ways in which IS might create competitive advantage. High cost or critical activity areas present good targets. And then step 4, investigate how IS might spawn new businesses. Step 5, develop a plan for taking advantage of IS, which is business driven rather than technology driven. The plan should also assign priorities to the IS investments, which of course should be subjected to the appropriate cost benefit analysis. Value networks. When we're looking at value networks, we're saying to ourselves external value chain or value network, the links between an organization and its strategic and non-strategic partners that form its external value chain. Okay, external value chain, the links between an organization and its strategic and non-strategic partners that form its external value chain. Okay, as companies outsource more, and more activities, management of the links between the company and its partners becomes more important. Okay. So, we can see that various authors say, describe the value network management as the process of effectively deciding what to outsource, in a constraint-based real-time environment based on fluctuations. So what are you going to outsource to other people, if anything? So towards the virtual organizations, an organization which uses information and communicates technology to allow it to operate without clearly defined physical boundaries between different functions. And virtualization. This is the process of a company developing more of the characteristics of the virtual organization. So if we think and go into a little more detail in terms of virtual organizations, really these describe the virtual model as a lead organization that creates alliances with groups and individuals from different organizations who possess the highest competences to build a specific product or service in a short period of time, really to try and gain market penetration. These alliances are virtual because products and services are not produced in a single corporation whose purpose is longevity. Rather, these new virtual organizations consist of a hybrid of groups and individuals from different companies that might even include customers, competitors, and suppliers who have a focused purpose of bringing a high quality product or service to market as rapidly as possible. So these alliances may be temporary with short-term, concept to delivery cycles. So there are many examples of different types of companies that operate as virtual companies. One example is Ensemble, a division of Hallmark. Is an example of the virtual enterprise that relies on outsourcing to become a more successful company. They rely on other companies to handle their manufacturing and distribution. Under an agreement with USCO, handles their entire order fulfillment, receipt of inbound goods, warehousing, and outbound transportation. Customers call in, fax, or transmit their orders to Ensemble via EDI. These orders then go to USCO. One of the main benefits Ensemble gains is that it only pays for the space and service they require. By this they can control costs, have flexibility, and still generate dynamic sales and marketing programs. Another example of companies that become some type of virtual company, is an insurance or financial service company. They do this to achieve optimum efficiency. The greatest improvement for insurance companies is to eliminate tasks by outsourcing. Not by working to make them more efficient. By relying on telecommunications, they are more flexible and able to meet the customer's demand for speed and responsiveness. So, options for restructuring the supply chain. What are the options for restructuring this? So as part of the strategy definition for digital business, managers will consider how the structure of the supply chain can be modified. These are mainly choices that have existed for many years, but internet technology provides a more efficient enabler and low-cost communications. Vertical integration, the extent to which a supply chain activities are undertaken and controlled within the organization. So when we're talking about vertically integrated backwards, we're saying that normally you might buy from a supplier. So if you are a retailer and you're big enough, you could potentially, if you had the resources, buy that supplier out if those goods were really important to you. So you would now own that supplier and those component parts coming in. So obviously, as a supplier, you would be making more profit because you'll be buying them at virtually cost, or the component parts. So again, that's vertically integrating backwards. What do we mean by virtual integration? The majority of the supply chain activities are undertaken and controlled outside the organization by third parties. Virtual integration. So here we're saying the supply chain activities are undertaken and controlled outside the organization by third parties. So here we can see, vertical integration, vertical disintegration, and virtual integration. So in the blue, vertical integration, the characteristics, majority of manufacture in-house, distant relationships with suppliers, and applications, specialized or proprietary production. In terms of virtual disintegration, We're talking about move to outsourcing, you know, supply network of suppliers, application, cost reduction, and focus on core capabilities. And virtual integration, we're talking about, characteristics, the total reliance on the linked third parties, close relationships with suppliers, and application, rapid market penetration, .com approach. Okay, virtual integration. So, the characteristics of virtual integration, vertical disintegration, and virtual integration. So, using digital business to restructure the supply chain. So, using digital communications to improve supply chain efficiency is dependent upon effective exchange and sharing of information. Information supply chain. So, an information-centric view of the supply chain which addresses the organization and technological challenges of achieving technological enabled supply chain management efficiency and effectiveness. And then information asymmetry, imperfect information sharing between members of a supply chain which increases uncertainty about demand and pricing. So again, we're talking about information, centric view of the supply chain which addresses organization technology challenges. Again, this is all about information and how we communicate and how we share that information with our suppliers and how we communicate to our suppliers this information, and then how this information is stored in terms of our IT technology within the organization. So there's an activity here, and the activity says to review the approach of two companies illustrated below, which tends to vertically integrate and which tends to virtual integration. So which one is vertical integration and which one is virtual integration. So produce a table summarizing the benefits and disadvantages of each approach. So each approach in terms of the vertical integration and the virtual integration. And then, how can information systems facilitate each approach? Approach 1, IBM during the 1980s and early 1990s. Manufacturers of these components by IBM plants of different locations, including IBM processors, IBM hard disks, and IBM cases, and IBM monitors, and even IBM mice. Distribution to companies by IBM Logistics. So approach 2, Dell in the 1990s and 2000s, manufacture all components by third parties in different locations, including Intel processors, Seagate hard disks, Sony monitors, and Microsoft mice. Assembly of some of the components in final product by third parties, adding appropriate monitor to system unit for each unit. So, which one's which? So IS supported upstream supply chain management. So here, the key activities of upstream supply chain management are procurement and upstream logistics. The way in which information systems can be used to support procurement in a digital business. Many, grocery retailers have been at the forefront of using technology to manage their upstream supply chain. RFID and the Internet of Things. RFID tags are a relatively recent innovation in ESCM that already widely used for logistic purposes. So, radio frequency identification. So, RFID, radio frequency identification. So microchip based electronic tags are used for monitoring anything they are attached to, whether innate products or innate people. So again, these tags will then be able to tell you where the products are at any time, what quantity you have, and how long they've been on the shelf for, because they have an electronic tag. So you can monitor anything they are attached to. So again, this is a relatively new thing, and this will help you to tell you how quickly your goods are moving, how quickly they're not moving. Are they stuck on the shelf? How long have they been on the shelf for? So again, very very good in terms of RFID tags, relatively new um, type of technology in logistics. So the Internet of Things and machine to machine applications. Objects are uniquely identified and tagged through technology such as RFID and made accessible through internet-like addresses. So IS or information systems supported downstream supply chain management. The key activities of downstream supply chain management are outbound logistics and fulfillment. In a business to business context, the benefits of downstream customers are, of course, similar to the benefits that the organization receives through automating its upstream supply chain. So, in order to, support the upstream and downstream, we really do need IS, which is information systems incorporated within the organizational structure, and to allow you to communicate between the different suppliers, companies, customers, and so on and so forth. And without these information systems incorporated, embedded in their databases, and to be able to write and reports and so on and so forth in terms of the different fields of the information that is collected, then this automation won't be really possible. So again, information systems are absolutely key to supporting downstream supply chain management. So what have we covered today? We've covered supply chain management. We've covered virtual organizations and IS and SCM. So thank you today from Mr. Tan.